The Duval Rundown, driven by Jacksonville Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westside, home of the lifetime warranty.
All right, we're live.
And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can also log on to their website, se-ortho.com. He is Dylan Denmark. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. And the Florida Gators play a football game tomorrow against South Florida, coming off a 55-0 victory over Long Island. And Denmark, rewinding the clock back quickly to last week, I don't know what, if anything, you could really take away from a victory over Long Island. In fact, it's funny, 55-0, yet I think more of the bad stuff is what I remember from last Saturday than actually the good stuff that transpired.
Yeah, Florida didn't look exactly hit on all cylinders on offense last week, and Long Island's one of the worst FCS teams in all of college football. So, I mean, what Florida saw in practice all week is a much better opponent than what they saw last Saturday. I mean, games like last Saturday, you kind of let your guard down. You know that you can just show up and you can play, and you know you can beat that team by 50, and I think that's what we kind of saw. Florida had a couple of guys out, Caleb Banks, Dallas Wilson. There was a couple others. But those were the main guys. And Florida just knew that they could just beat the team handedly, and that's what they did. Like when the receivers didn't have a good connection on a couple of times. It looked like Lagway hadn't been practicing, which kind of reports from the game camp. He was in a boot, so we don't know how much time he missed. But, yeah, nothing to be too worried about. And South Florida's going to be a quality opponent tomorrow as they beat Boise last week.
You know, what was interesting, I agree with you. Lagway didn't look great, and yet you look at his numbers, he was 15 of 18 for 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and yet I think everybody's in agreement that he did not look great. Quickly, a couple of things. Tackles for loss that the offensive line gave up last week. Long Island was in double digits for tackles for loss, and then Trey Smack missing as many field goals last Saturday as he did in the entirety of 2024. Either one of those a red flag for you moving forward?
The 10 tackles for losses was probably the most, not disappointing, but the biggest red flag for me. A team like Long Island should not have 10 tackles for loss. Eugene Wilson had, I guess this counts as tackle for loss. Eugene Wilson had 5 catches for -4 yards and a touchdown. That I mean, you probably never see that stat line ever again. Maybe, once in your lifetime, if you can ever remember one. And then Trey Smack, I'm not too worried. Now, if he does it tomorrow and he misses a kick or two, then that's a concern. But, Smack missing the long field goal, I'm not worried about. But the one that's, within 45, 40 yards, that's a little concerning. But, you correct that tomorrow. If you kick a field goal or two and you make it, you forget about last week.
We talk about the gauntlet beginning next week against LSU. Then you go to Miami, a bye week, and then Texas and Texas A&M. But there is that game tomorrow. And, a week ago, or I guess 8 days ago, I didn't honestly think very much of the South Florida game. Obviously, it was going to be harder than Long Island. And then USF goes out there in week 1 and just absolutely destroys a top 25 opponent in Boise State. Now, look, Florida should still win this game rather easily tomorrow. But I would be lying, Denmark, if I said that USF outcome last week over Boise didn't get my attention a little bit.
Yeah, if you didn't watch the game and you looked at the score, you would be like, "Oh wow, this is probably gonna be a good USF team." USF did a great job last week of when Boise got around the 35-30 yard line, sometimes at the 20, USF just shut them down. Boise had 3 turnovers, put the ball on the ground a couple of times. They had a big hit early in the game that kind of set the tone for the game. And, their quarterback used his legs, Brown, for USF, and, they were able to do what they did. I'm not too concerned because if you look at the matchup, and again, I don't know how good Boise is. I would assume, Ashton Genty last year had almost half of the offensive production, and he's not there no more, obviously. He's in the NFL. What matchup for USF do they have the advantage over Florida? And I can't think of one. The only one that I could look at that I'm concerned about tomorrow is the quarterback using his legs to, extend the plays when he gets out of the side of the pocket and move on. USF's running attack wasn't even that impressive last week against Boise. I think they had it was a little over 100 yards, and they had a 50-yard run midway through the fourth quarter once the game was already over. So there's not really any matchup that I look at tomorrow where I say Florida is not going to be good here. USF could be in favor here for tomorrow. But yeah, USF played well last Thursday. They do have 2 extra days to prepare for the game. But I think at the end of the day, if for whatever reason Lagway and the offense cannot get it rolling, they can just rely on the offense and rely on the offensive line and just mow them over.
You are watching and listening to the Gator Bytes podcast, 1010XL.com's podcast network, also the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. Southeast Orthopedic Specialist has been a sponsor of this program for years. You can listen to the good doctor, Kevin Murphy, Thursday mornings on The Drill with Jeff and Dan for his analysis of injuries in the world of sports, and we certainly appreciate the great folks at Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for their continued support of the Gator Bytes podcast. Honestly, Denmark, it might have been a blessing in disguise. Florida was going to say all the right things, but with LSU next week, I always thought there might be that look-ahead factor against USF. You're not going to look past them now after what they did to Boise last week. So from that standpoint, not only did USF, I think, get a lot of people's attention, I'm sure they got the Florida football players' attention as well, which will probably bode well tomorrow for the Gators.
Yeah, USF. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of these guys that went to USF, they went there because they can't get into Florida, or Florida State, or Miami. So that USF's always had this game circled, and USF's played well against Power 5 opponents the last couple of years, specifically against Alabama. Remember when they almost beat them? I think that was about 2 years ago. So, USF's going to come in. I expect it to be a game in the first half. It'll probably be close. Might be a field goal or a touchdown game. This spread has moved around, between 17 and 18 points, which I think is right. And, I agree with you that, if any of the Florida players were, thinking that they could mosey in and just show up, that's not going to be the case. Florida still has to show up, perform, and execute, and then they can win by, 20 or whatever the score is. But I do think it'll be a close game in the first half.
You mentioned Caleb Banks, Dallas Wilson. We know both guys are reportedly close to coming back. Do you want to see either one of those players tomorrow, or do you want to give them an extra week to get ready for LSU?
What was Dallas Wilson's injury again? I can't.
It's described as lower body, I believe. But they said it was a minor lower body.
Okay. So if he's 80%, I would want to see him play. Caleb Banks, if he's not close to 80%, I wouldn't play him. That's a guy that's played a lot of games, and you need him ready to go for the rest of the entire season. So we'll see. There's no injury report that's been reported. I think we get that first one next week whenever they get in a conference play when they play LSU. So it's going to be, kind of like a wait and see game. Wait until they, kick off of the game on Saturday, which is at 4:15. So Caleb Banks, I wouldn't push him. Dallas Wilson, I would. Those would be the two guys that I would be, keying in on for the injuries.
I imagine Dallas Wilson is jonesing to get out there based on what Vernell Brown did last week. Again, it was Long Island, so you got to take that into account. But you always look for signs of who that next great Florida wide receiver is going to be. Did Vernell Brown give you those signs last week?
Well, he was the third true freshman receiver to start as a freshman. The other two were Antonio Callaway and Percy Harvin. Those guys are pretty good. So, yeah, Vernell Brown did look pretty good. And it's funny, Vernell Brown, I think with most Gator Nation, that's what everybody thought Dallas Wilson was going to do in his first game. And he just so happens to get hurt. So, I mean, look, we knew this receiving core was going to be really, really good. And, none of those guys left in the transfer portal throughout, the spring and the summer, and they all stayed. And we knew if that were the case, that you're going to have a lot of guys that are, going to be good. And the problem is there's only one ball to go around. So, if Dallas Wilson is able to get play, I mean, realistically, what's his stat line look? It's great for the defense, to, not key in on one guy in the offense, the ball can go around, but, there's only one ball. So I wonder, just give him a couple catches, get him in the groove of things before, you really start to get into the meat of the schedule.
Defensively, it was a shutout. I thought Miles Graham was flying around doing some things. And I got to tell you, got a lot of people we've had on Hacker After Dark over there in Gainesville have singled out Jaden Woods. I didn't know a lot about him. I remember him in the recruiting process, but I just heard Jaden Woods' name so many times. And now I understand why. Because I think he got glimpses last week of what may be the next big-time Gator defensive lineman there with Jaden Woods.
Yeah, I mean, going into the season, we all knew about Caleb Banks and Sapp, and understood they're projected to be first rounders next year if you look at some out of the mock drafts. But you're going to need more than those two guys to win potentially 8-9 games this year with this schedule. And those were a couple of guys that you mentioned. Who else is going to perform on this team? I'm not looking at anything from Long Island being like, this can be a guy. I was just watching a couple of the receivers. That was my main takeaway, kind of like everybody else. But now it's okay. You're playing a quality opponent. You're going to be playing guys that you're going to actually, play against that can make NFL rosters. Mm-hmm. So who else are going to be those guys? I want to look at the linebacking core and see who are a couple of those guys. We know Graham. We know Pup Howard. He missed a little bit of time in camp. How ready, is he fully ready to go now? And then the secondary a year ago to start the year was, atrocious. And the secondary, looked decent last week. So yeah, the defense is going to be much improved, and I'm intrigued to see who is specifically on the D line is going to step up tomorrow.
With DJ Lagway's injury issues that he's had in his short time in Gainesville, the backup quarterback is obviously an important point. And it was really cool last week to see Mandarin High School's own Tramel Jones go out there. And again, he looked good. Now, the caveat, it is Long Island, but it was his first college football game ever as a true freshman quarterback in a Gator uniform. And I thought Tramel Jones was outstanding. And the fact that it appears that he's passed Aiden Warner and Harrison Bailey on the depth chart goes to show you what the coaching staff already thinks of the true freshman. And I loved what I saw out of Tramel Jones. And in a perfect world, Florida has the game easily in hand in the fourth quarter tomorrow, and maybe we get to see some more of Tramel Jones.
Yeah, confidence was the one thing when he came in. Like, he wasn't spooked by anything. He was confident what he was going to do. And I agree with you. Here's one thing. Lagway's injury history has not been exactly, good in the last year. And if he goes down, you got to find somebody. And the truth of the matter is, with Tramel Jones being the number 2 guy, you feel a lot better with the offense than you do with Aiden Warner as you did a year ago. And I at least feel now with Tramel Jones, if he does get a couple snaps and he has to play, a drive or two for whatever the case may be going down the stretch, you feel a lot more confident that you can at least stay in the game as opposed to, okay, now we have to run the ball 3 times and just, hopefully we can get a first down and punt.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to some of the other games around the country. We'll give our final prediction on Florida and USF in a moment as well. But we got to mention Jaden Ball again. All the talent in the world. The guy's only a true sophomore, right? He's a sophomore running back, and he was fantastic last week. Obviously, want to see him do that against tougher competition, but you have to love what you saw out of the Gator running game. Despite the tackles for loss that the offensive line gave up, they ran the ball really well, and Jaden Ball was the key part of that.
Yeah, Ball, I would say he's probably the best back in the SEC, and I don't think a lot of people would disagree. He's certainly in the conversation of the top three guys that are in that group with best backs in the SEC, and he's shown it. I mean, he can do anything you want, and I mean the running back group is really good too. We're talking and Trayon Webb didn't even play as he had a procedure earlier in camp. He's expected to be back in a couple weeks. Yeah, Jaden Ball is really really good. Something that Florida hasn't had that bell cow back in quite a few years, and he's definitely that kind of person. And I don't want to see him get too many carries because you don't want to wear those tires out. Against an opponent like USF, you don't have to. But if needed, that it's good to have a back like him in the second half if the game isn't the way you want it to go.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any orthopedic injury or concern. They got offices all over Northeast Florida in both Duval and St. John's, and you can visit their website, se-ortho.com, and we certainly appreciate Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. Denmark, we'll get back to Florida and USF in a moment. It's not a great weekend of college football, but there are a couple of interesting games involving SEC teams. Let's begin in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech lost to South Carolina last week. Now Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia go to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech. It'd be a nice win if Vanderbilt can go up there and win. Who do you like between Vanderbilt and Va Tech tomorrow?
I think it'd be a close game. I'll probably take Vandy slightly. Virginia Tech kind of impressed me how they played against Sellers. I mean, we saw that first drive, and it was like boom, 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 touchdown. You're like, this can get ugly. And, hats off to them. They stuck around. And, if not for that punt return late for South Carolina, I think it was 80 yards for the score. That game could have been a lot different. This game won't surprise me either way if it go, Virginia Tech or Vandy, but I'll probably lean Vandy slightly.
Big game for the ACC. I know Florida State beat Bama, but every other ACC-SEC matchup last week went the SEC's way. So Virginia Tech, it would help them and help the conference out if they could get a win over an SEC foe tomorrow. The first SEC versus SEC game is tomorrow of the season. Ole Miss traveling to Lexington to take on Kentucky. Remember, Kentucky went into Oxford a year ago and beat Jackson Dart and the Rebels. Ole Miss trying to get some revenge. I didn't think either one of these teams were very impressive last week. They both won, but I think both will tell you they can play better. You have to like Ole Miss and the revenge factor tomorrow night, don't you, against Kentucky?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much as a revenge factor as it is. I'm taking Lane Kiffin's offense against, what feels like a down Kentucky team. I mean, it feels like out of every SEC team, like Kentucky was one of the least spoken on teams in the offseason. Now, granted, the last couple of years, Kentucky is always known for playing in a game where they shouldn't really be in it or people don't expect them to play whenever everybody writes them off. Remember last year, Kentucky really took the air out of the ball, ran the ball. I mean, I think they had like a 10-minute drive, a 7-minute drive. They held Ole Miss on a couple of fourth downs, if I'm not mistaken, and they went into Oxford and won that game. And we've seen what Kentucky can do to Georgia in the last couple of years, kind of do the same thing and taking the ball out and run with a lot. I don't think that's that Kentucky team this year. I like Ole Miss in this one.
Yeah, I like Ole Miss too, but I think you're right. The way Kentucky wins the game is ball control, physicality, that sort of thing. We'll see what happens. Probably the game of the week in college football is Michigan and Oklahoma. The Big Ten got the best of the SEC last week when Ohio State beat Texas. What happens when Michigan and Oklahoma get together tomorrow?
Yeah, this is going to be the game of the night. Really, the only one I think that most college football fans are really going to be intrigued to. 7:30 kick. This game could go either way. I lean Oklahoma, just with the quarterback situation. I'm not sure with Michigan. I know Michigan is physical and up front, and as they typically are. But I would probably lean Oklahoma in this matchup tomorrow.
Yeah, I like Oklahoma as well. And I know Matt Hayes, our colleague at 1010XL, and he obviously does a great job for the USA Today. In the preseason, he had Oklahoma winning the Southeastern Conference. There may be one of those under the radar teams, but if they beat Michigan tomorrow night, they will certainly get a lot of the national spotlight. And that does bring us back to Florida and USF, 4:15 on Saturday. You'll hear the game on 1010XL. Pregame coverage beginning about 1 o'clock, 1:15 tomorrow afternoon. Look, I think Florida's going to win the game. Again, I'm not going on much of a limb there. I do think it's competitive at halftime. Florida might be up 10, 14 points at halftime. I think probably midway through the third, the game is really no longer in doubt. Give me the Gators something around the 44-17, 41-20 type game. Again, I think it's a decent game, but I don't think it's in question in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think 38-17, and South Florida might squeak in a 24 at the very end, like at a garbage time touchdown. I'm with you. I think the score in the first quarter will be 10-7. South Florida might even have the lead at 10-7. Florida might have the lead, at half by 4 points. And then the second half, I expect Florida to get it rolling, and I expect a lot of big plays. And hopefully Florida can limit those big plays on defense, and the big plays can be on their offensive side, and hopefully they can take care of business, have a nice lead in the fourth quarter, get a couple of the backups in, and then the gauntlet starts the next 4 games.
Yeah, and to that point, as we wrap up, obviously it's going to be a much different conversation for us next Friday when Florida heads out to the Bayou to take on LSU. Outside of Lagway playing better, do you just hope everything that went wrong last week gets cleaned up? Tackles for loss, the kicking game. Is that what you're hoping to see tomorrow?
Yeah, mainly the offense, smooth operation. I'm sure that this week of practice was pretty good. Usually when you don't play as well, usually you come back and practice the following week a lot better. So I expect to see, a lot better chemistry between Lagway, the receivers, the run game, and the offensive line to play a lot better. I don't expect 10 tackles for loss in the first half.
We're here every Friday morning for Gator Bytes. During the season, we'll be back to preview LSU, review South Florida. We also invite you to join Dylan Denmark and myself tonight on 1010XL and 92.5 FM for the Friday Night Lights postgame. It is the best Friday night of high school football in the Jacksonville area coming up this evening. You got Bowles, St. Augustine. You got Tallahassee, Lincoln, and Nice, Fleming Island, and Oakleaf. Ponte Vedra, Baker County, Denmark, the games, Rains, Trinity Christian. It is going to be a phenomenal night of high school football here in Northeast Florida.
Yeah, a lot of those games are probably top 10 matchups in the city if you have to give a power ranking. So definitely measuring stick games for a lot of these teams. And, this is good for a lot of these teams because you want to know where you're at before you start district play. Playoffs are a long ways away from now, but the playoffs are based on the strength of schedule. So if you get these wins, a lot of the teams you just named, those are high quality opponents. So you get these wins now, you can rely on that strength of schedule, even if you don't win your district. And best time of year, man, Friday night, high school football. It's the best form of football out there.
And Friday Night Lights will begin roughly about 9:30 this evening on 1010XL and 92.5 FM and right here on the 1010XL Podcast Network. He is Dylan Denmark. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. Thank you for watching and listening to Gator Bytes, presented by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. We'll be back next Friday to preview the Bayou as Florida heads out to play LSU.